Good afternoon, everyone, and I wish to welcome the officials from the various ministries and entities, members of the media, and members of the public to this public meeting of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. My name is Bridget Annie-Said George, and I'm the chairman of this committee. And the Committee on Public Administration and Appropriations, the PAAC, has a mandate to consider and to report to the House on A, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies to ensure that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. B, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies as it occurs, and to keep Parliament informed of how the budget allocation is being implemented. And C, the administration of government agencies to determine hindrances to their efficiency and to make recommendations to the government for improvement of public administration. The purpose of this public meeting of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee is to follow up on the recommendations from the 12th report on the administration of disaster relief in Trinidad and Tobago and the corresponding ministerial responses from the following stakeholders: the Ministry of National Security, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, and the Ministry of Finance. The committee is desirous of hearing from stakeholders to discover the progress made since the committee's 12th report was presented on December 18, 2018. The committee also wishes to discover any challenges that persist and determine possible solutions to these challenges. The role of the committee is to assist stakeholders in achieving the efficient delivery of services while ensuring that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. This meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on Parliament's Channel 11, Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's inquiry via email parl101@ttparliament.org, facebook.com/ttparliament, Twitter @ttparliament. I will now invite the representatives of the Ministry of National Security, Office of the Disaster Preparedness and Management, Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, and the Ministry of Finance to introduce themselves. So we could start in that order. So maybe we could start with Ministry of National Security.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and members of the PAAC. I'm Vel Lewis, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of National Security.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the panel. Captain Retired Neville Wint, Operations Manager, Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. I am Raymond Sipol, Active Deputy Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, and to the committee. I'm Jerry David. I am the Senior Disaster Management Coordinator at the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government.
Okay, so maybe then we can go to the person to the right of Mr. Lewis.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Suzette Leachy, Permanent Secretary in Ministry of Finance.
Thank you.
Good afternoon to all. I am Cherry Ann Lejean, Director of Budgets, Budget Division, Ministry of Finance.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Lydia Jacobs, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Good afternoon to all. I'm Joan Lewis, Senior Project Analyst, Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Okay. So can we then start from the right of me in the back row?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, and to all. I am Siunayan Ramsaran, Assistant Chief Officer from the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am Major Jermaine Rocheford, Acting Commanding Officer of the 1st Engineer Battalion, representing the Defence Force.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Tricia O'Neill. I'm the Human Resource Officer 3 at the Ministry of National Security.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Denise Anderson, Regional Coordinator in the Preparedness and Response Unit at the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management.
Good afternoon, all. I'm Dennis Marcel, Information Technology Infrastructure Specialist at the ODPM.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Vanessa Teasdale from the Ministry of Finance.
Good afternoon. My name is Hafanel Brown, Acting Treasury Director, Treasury Division.
President, good afternoon to all. My name is Rafik Ali, Director, Regional Administration South, Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am Kirk Hammer, Director, Regional Administration North, Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Thank you, everyone, and I'll now invite members of the committee to introduce themselves, starting with my right. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Wade Mark, member.
Good afternoon, Clarence Rambarat, member.
Good afternoon, Amrita Deonarain, member.
And today the committee is ably assisted by its secretary, Ms. Kiba Jacob, its assistant secretary, Ms. Shuran Samuel, and its procedural officer, Ms. Vanna Janki Prasad. Okay, so that I think to begin the conversation, I would ask, start off with Mr. Vel Lewis and invite him to make a brief opening statement.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Simply to say that we at the Ministry of National Security are pleased to be here at this inquiry of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, treating with the administration of disaster relief in Trinidad and Tobago. As all would know, the Ministry of National Security has key responsibility for disaster preparedness and management, particularly through the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, the ODPM. The ODPM, of course, is ably assisted by the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, and particularly the Engineering Battalion of the Defense Force. They're also assisted by the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Services, and of course, to a lesser extent, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and the Cadet Force. The Ministry in the last several months has taken the opportunity to upgrade its preparedness and mitigation efforts to plan and to prepare for natural disasters, particularly with the coming of the hurricane season. The Ministry has taken the opportunity to review its plans and programs and activities. The Ministry has also, over the last several months, gone out to several public outreach and public awareness programs. Added to that, the Ministry has also taken the opportunity in the last several weeks, never mind some delays, to try to fill all the positions, particularly the technical positions within the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, and later on we could give you some details as to the efforts we've been making in that regard. With those few words, I want to close at this point.
Thank you, sorry. I'll now invite retired Captain Neville Wynn to make his opening statement.
President, good afternoon to you again, Chair and members of the committee. Since we last met, Chair, the ODPM has attempted and successfully so to deliver on some of the recommendations made. We continue to strive in our efforts to employ all of government, all of community approach to comprehensive disaster management in Trinidad and Tobago. And we will, with the other support of the other arms of government and the ministry, attempt to do that in the coming months and years ahead. I wish, on behalf of the staff and the hardworking staff of the ODPM, to thank you for having us here, and I hold myself now available to answer any questions or concerns that the committee might have towards the operations of the ODPM.
Thank you very much. And may I now invite Ms. Lydia Jacobs, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries has been collaborating with its stakeholders over the past year in order to bring a more structured and strategic approach to disaster management in the agricultural sector, bearing in mind that in this sector there are specific and unique needs. We have therefore strategically partnered with our international agencies, the Food and Agriculture Organization, and the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation, ICA, to lend expertise in areas that are lacking, so that as we approach another rainy season, some of the systems and structures would have been strengthened to meet the expected challenges. We therefore appreciate the opportunity today to meet with the committee and share what we have accomplished thus far. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jacob. And I now call upon Mr. Raymond Seapol, the Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I think I should correct myself, the Acting Deputy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, which exercises oversight over the 14 first responder municipal corporations, consider it a pleasure and privilege to be present at a forum such as this, where disaster management issues can be discussed with the intention of arriving at solutions and answers. The subject of this afternoon's session, I am certain, will be of tremendous interest to our citizens, especially when one remembers the calamitous flooding that struck certain parts of Trinidad in October 2018. Madam Chair, while watching the 7 o'clock news 2 nights ago, we were informed of Andrea, the first tropical storm in 2019, which is developing over the Atlantic in our neck of the woods. And just imagine this, the official hurricane season has not yet commenced. Although this first weather system poses no threat to us, when I heard this, I felt a sense of trepidation over something which would never have bothered me prior to October last year. The reality is that climate change is real and it is here, despite the common perception that God is a Trini. The sad situation which occurred in Mozambique a few weeks ago is the stark reality of this. However, Madam Chair, it comforts me to know that we, some of the main disaster management proponents in our country, can all assemble here to address this critical issue of disaster preparedness. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seapol. And lastly, I invite Mrs. Suzette Taylor Lichi, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance, to make her brief opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. The Ministry of Finance welcomes the opportunity to come before the committee to clarify any outstanding matters that remain following our last appearance and subsequent to our written responses which were submitted in April. We do consider ourselves to be at the front lines of disaster response, and we recognize that we have a key role to play in that regard. Accordingly, we have used the utility of the contingency fund to make available funds over and above the budgeted appropriations to the respective line ministries and the various agencies. And I must say we have been very responsive in that regard, and we're able to make funds available in a very timely manner, in spite of the current cash constraints. We also continue to maintain catastrophic insurance coverage through the CRIFT and have benefited from 2 payouts following our 2 most recent events. Currently, we are seeking approval to renew and expand the CRIFT insurance coverage based on more accurate models as well as our past experiences. So again, Madam Chairman, thank you for the opportunity, and we look forward to the committee's questions.
Thank you very much. And I think I will want to start with the Ministry of Finance, and certainly because everything revolves around funding. But in terms of expanding on CRIF, and also in your submission, the LPP, which I think is something new, and if we can get some sort of, information with respect to what that new policy is, and how would that impact on funding availability to lend to disaster relief?
Well, first of all, the policy has not been approved as yet. It has been submitted to Cabinet, and there are several options that may be approved by Cabinet. So right now we don't have an approved new policy. We're hoping to get that by the end of this week. The coverage this year is based on an improved model. And when you utilize the model, and based on the last two major disasters we had, the payout would be increased based on the current model. So while I don't have details, we can certainly submit it to the committee once we have the Cabinet approval for the new coverage going forward.
So the new coverage relates to what? Because if you could just clarify a little bit for me. First, I know there's CRIF, and you spoke about an expanded policy. And then I also asked with respect to the LPP. So the new policy, the new coverage, are we talking about both, or are we talking about the LPP?
We're talking about the CRIF coverage. So the CRIF coverage there's a separate coverage for Trinidad and Tobago. We have an excess rainfall coverage. We have a coverage for earthquake, and we have tropical cyclone coverage. So so we have recommendations for a new policy for the year starting June 1st before Cabinet that we hope to get approval. And like I said, there are several options.
That's with respect to CRIF?
CRIF, yes.
So is LPP part of CRIF, or is that something separate and distinct?
That was a pilot project that was discussed. So that is not an official part of the coverage going forward. That is something that was being discussed and addressed.
Is this the response? This is our response.
Yes, so it was a pilot project to look at the responses for microagriculture.
Okay, so I'm referring really to page 3 of the submission you all would have sent to us, and this is Roman numeral 8, all right, which reads like this. The LPP is, under this project, a parametric micro-insurance product called the Livelihood Protection Policy was developed. The LPP is designed to help protect the livelihoods of vulnerable low-income individuals, such as small farmers, tourism workers, fishers, market vendors, and day laborers.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's part of the coverage for this year that is currently before Cabinet.
Okay.
But we hadn't had it previously.
So what I'm understanding is that there are several elements of CRIF.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes. So this is
and the several elements would have been excess rainfall, tropical cyclone, I think it's an earthquake?
Earthquakes, yes.
All right. So there are a basket of goods under this big policy, and
yes.
one that we were exploring would have been the LPP. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. What you're saying is the actual CRIF policy to go forward has not yet been determined by Cabinet.
No,
You're not sure how many different types of events it would cover?
Yes, we have some options. Yes, we have some recommendations, but it hasn't been approved as yet.
Okay, and you expect that by the 1st of June?
We expect it to be in Cabinet this week, and yes,
okay.
and be implemented by the 1st of June.
So therefore, until such time as you get approval, you would not be able to shed further light on what will be covered?
Yes.
All right. And therefore, your undertaking would be that when that has been approved, you would advise the committee accordingly?
Most certainly.
Okay, I understand. All right. So, having regard to that, can I then also just move a bit to Mr. Lewis, Mr. Val Lewis, to ask about something very interestingly he said in his opening statement concerning the filling of the vacancies of the staff in the ODPM, because in the response we had originally obtained, this was an ongoing exercise without there being any expansion on any positions being filled. But I did hear you say that some have been in spite of your challenges. So maybe you could expand on that a bit so that the committee can get an idea of how better equipped ODPM is at this stage.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to say that since the exercise started several months ago, we've been able to fill two of the key positions in the ODPM. The ministry had actually advertised some of the key technical positions. Unfortunately, that advertisement went out and it was not well done. I have to admit, the time period, I believe, might have been too short, and therefore the response to that original ad was not very good. The advertisement was done again for all 15 technical positions. 15, well, mostly technical positions, but within there, 2 or 3 administrative positions. The response has been a lot better on this occasion. We've actually begun shortlisting for interviews. Some of the interviews are actually scheduled for later this week. That's tomorrow and Friday, with other interviews scheduled for next week. We are confident, actually, the plan was actually originally to have these positions filled before June 1, before the beginning of the season. Unfortunately, because of the delay, we are now aiming and we are confident that we should be able to fill, if not all of these positions, but the majority of these positions should be filled by the middle of June. That's the target at this time.
Okay, so just so that I can get some clarification, Mr. Lewis, all the positions we're talking about number how many?
The position advertised, Madam Chairman. The positions advertised with number 15. That's 15? 15 positions.
That's 50.
Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of the ODPM, what we were told is that their complement should be 44, but at the time of the inquiry, there were 18, if my recollection is correct. Okay? So that you've gone out for 15.
Yeah.
And those 15 is additional to the two key positions that you said have been filled. I might ask, what are the 2 key positions that have been filled?
Those are the positions of logistics officer and operations manager. Operations manager, of course, filled by retired Captain Neville Wind.
Okay, but retired Captain Wind wasn't there before?
Yeah, Captain Wind was in another position prior to his assumption of duty as operations manager.
Okay, so he was in a lower position.
He was the relief officer at the ODPM.
All right. So does that mean the relief officer's position is now vacant?
So that position was also advertised.
And so that is a part of the 15?
Yes. Sir.
Yes?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, so you have 2 key positions and you now have 15 that you've advertised for. I'm not going to ask you to list it out here, but if you could let us know of the 15 in writing which have been advertised. And if I understand well, with all the information that you have given me, just so that I could understand, of the 15, you have shortlisted how many? For how many positions? Because what I'm really trying to find out, of the 15 positions, by the 18th of June, how many of these 15 positions are going to be filled by you? I want to share your sense of optimism and, you know, having regard to what Mr. Seipol just said to me about Andrea, I too become concerned.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. We've shortlisted up for approximately 9 of the positions so far. The shortlisting exercise is actually ongoing. We've shortlisted for the 9 most, we shortlisted for 9 of the key senior positions. Those positions shortlisted, interviews have already been set for those positions between this week and next week.
So you've shortlisted for 9. As far as the 6, you said it's ongoing. Would that be for the other 6 positions? Yes?
Yes, Madam
Okay.
Chairman.
And the position that Mr. Wint held, I can't remember, but it was relief officer, is that of the 9 that you've shortlisted for?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Okay. All right, so certainly by the 18th. And then as far as the other remaining 11 positions, if my maths is correct, what will be the position with that?
That should be another 5 positions. 6, another 6 positions.
9 and 6 make 15. What you've told me is that of those, it's ongoing, right? But if you accept what I have said, that there are 26 vacancies, I might be wrong, so you may have to correct me on that. That's where I get the 11.
Those positions, Madam Chairman, we haven't taken a decision yet on how soon we are going to fill those. Those were not considered to be, at this time, critical to the operations of the ODPM going forward. What we're hoping to do is, after we've completed the filling of the positions we've advertised, we're going to look at those positions to determine which ones we are going to prioritize. What we set out to do here was to prioritize those positions that were critical to the operations based on the fact that we were hoping to have these positions filled in time for the rainy season.
Okay. So, would it then be, because what we were told is that having regard to the shortfall in the staff, the ODPM was being severely hampered in that a lot of the officers had to exercise the functions of 2 to 3 other officers. And a lot of the technical officers were performing managerial functions as well. So that when you say to me that what you've done is prioritize the need based on the operational, or based on the requirements of the ODPM so that they won't be hampered, what would have been the criteria for saying what is critical? Because if technical people doing managerial work, and I would expect both are critical for the proper functioning of the organization. So what would have been your considerations? If it's only technical you did, or if it's managerial you did, or by coming by, if you did a mix, what were your considerations in saying, look, we only need to look at 15 right now, and not the whole 26, to bring the ODPM up to the sort of efficiency that it will be required to fulfill, having regard to all the changing elements of the climate. And I don't want to say disaster, because retired Captain Wint will still have his opportunity to explain to me disaster, event, occurrence happening. So I want to be careful in the word that I choose.
Well, as I said earlier, Madam Chairman, the 15 positions advertised that we are proposing to fill by middle June, it's a mix. What I said was the majority would be technical positions. But for example, we have advertised the post of corporate services manager, financial manager, and HR analyst. So those functions that technical persons might have been assisting with, we are hoping to have those positions filled and be dealt with by those officers in those 3 positions. And of course, in the management role as well, we've advertised the post of the Chief Executive Officer and Deputy Chief Executive Officer.
Okay, so that hopefully by the 18th of June, you will have this proper mix, and therefore, what we'd ask is that you would submit to us. I don't know what day of the week the 20th of June is. We should know. We should know what day of the week the 20th is. I think that's a Friday. So that's a working day of that week. So hopefully by the 20th of June, you could submit to us how many have been filled and the positions, and with effect from what date people would begin to work, and your ongoing plan for the other positions. Okay, and while I have your ear, if you could tell us a bit about this RRMC model and that proposal and where we're going with that.
Thank you again, Madam Chairman. With respect to the risk reduction management centers, we've moved a little way on that since last time we reported to you. The Ministry has actually identified funding that we are proposing to meet with the UNDP officials here in Trinidad and Tobago to determine the way forward. The SBAA, the Standard Basic Assistance Agreement, that has also been finalized, so we're hoping over the next few days to meet with UNDP officials to chart the way forward.
Okay, so can I then say, as far as the Risk Reduction Management Center proposal, between January and now, some headway has been made to bring that to fruition, because the issue was that you all couldn't bear your part of the expense, of the cost. So the funding you have identified, is that equivalent to your complete portion of the cost?
Yes, Madam Chairman, that is equivalent to the contribution from the Ministry of National Security.
That's your contribution. And let me ask you something. If this doesn't come on stream by September, do you lose it? Do you lose the funding if it doesn't come on stream by the end of the fiscal year?
Well, this might be something, Madam Chairman, that I'd have to confirm with the UNDP officials. I suspect you're referring to the funding from the UNDP.
No, your share.
Our funding.
Okay. Because UNDP, if I remember well, waiting on us for some time. Yeah. So we have been the kickback in that we have not been able to identify what is our contribution. That was the position up to December last year. You've now telling me you have. I want to know, having regard to the fact that you can't move forward because your SBA is still being finalized. If it happens that the end of the fiscal year comes and you have not finalized this, if you lose these funds that you have identified?
Well, Madam Chairman, I'm confident that we will finalize the agreement. If the fiscal year should close and the funds are not utilized on the particular project, we most likely would have to utilize the funds somewhere else. But certainly we should make arrangements to have funding in the new fiscal period to continue the project.
You know, Mr. Lewis, the lovely thing about sitting here, you get to read body language, and seeing the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Finance. I don't know how to read, but I'm certainly reading something there. Okay, so that what my real concern is this: you finally identified funds, and I am not certain that if you use it somewhere else, as you say you are likely to do, that you will get it from somewhere else in fiscal 2019-2020. Okay, so that I want to support your confidence that the SBAA will be finalized by in a few days. I don't know what a few days takes us to. Is that Monday? When is the few days? Well, let me put it another way. What is the key back?
I think once we meet with the UNDP...
what date is that meeting?
I'm trying to get that meeting next week, Chair, to finalize those arrangements, and hopefully from that a way forward and an action plan can be developed on how we're going to complete this project.
Okay, well, and I guess Mr. Seapole really set the stage for my anxiety. It means the meeting has not yet been set up.
No, Chair.
No. All right. So next week is a short week, if I remember well.
Yes, Chair.
Okay. So let's say you get a meeting the week after. Right? No, not next week. The week after. Next week is a short week. What then are the steps to ensure that this happens to support your confidence?
The next step thereafter is working with the UN consultants and in-country agencies and therefore develop all the action items, identifying all the resources that would be needed to complete the project, bringing all the stakeholders on board, because the UN too have changed some of their in-house persons, which I don't see that as a problem, but it's just to keep everything in line, have those action items, develop a scope of works, and therefore commence the activation of the initiatives to complete the RRMC model.
Okay, let me ask you something, Mr. Wynn. None of us have control of anybody else but ourselves. Give me your time frame.
My time frame is once we commence the meeting during the course of the next 2 weeks, at least.
You've gone from 1 week to 2 weeks?
Well,
right.
Based on our discussion, Chair, being next week a short week, and worst case, the second week, I'm working with a 2-week window. Hopefully within the next 2 months, we can get this started without any operational and administrative constraints. And once the PS has given the commitment and the funds are available, we will then commit with that. But at this point in time, the aim is to complete this within the financial year. I cannot clearly determine that because I still need to sit with UNDP and work out those scope of works. But one of the greatest mandates is to ensure that this is done within this fiscal year, to ensure that the funds allocated can be utilized. As you have indicated, there can be issues if funds are not utilized and getting it into the next fiscal year programming.
Okay, so I'm going to come off it just now. I just want to ask 2 things. So it means that this model is just a concept. It hasn't been populated at all in terms of equipment, what it would look like, or anything like that as yet?
It has been done based on the first phase of the program, as we have previously reported. And that is why we just go back into it to redefine what has to be done, what resources is needed based on the current landscape and the communities that will be selected, and then we go forward. So it's not a model that we now have to go and develop. We had the pilot program that was really successful, and now we are continuing those other initiatives. So it's just, Chair, to really update it, look at any gaps that might have been created between the lapse in time. There has been a considerable lapse in time between the pilot program and then going forward. And once we close those gaps in a short space of time, continue with all the initiatives to effect the program.
Okay, so can I ask you, because I'm reminded that next week is a short week again, but the week after is a shorter week. So, but I'm holding it to that 2-week window, right?
Appreciate it.
So can you therefore liaise with us and let us know that the meeting has taken place, and therefore I think from the meeting you'll be able to give us a more realistic time frame of all the modeling and selection and identification, so that we could really bring these centers on stream before, well, according to what Mr. Seapole told me, I can't say before 1st June 2019, but certainly before, it'll have to be before 30th of September 2019.
Yes, Chair, we try
Okay.
to do it as soon as possible, take into consideration that we are looking at an all-hazard approach, so it's not
And
just the hurricane season.
Not just the event and the disaster, but
Yes,
the
ma'am.
hazard.
So we are trying to do it as fast as possible, taking all the hazards to which we are exposed to. So
Okay.
it is a matter of urgency.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wint, tell us what lessons you learned from October 2018.
Thank you very much for the question, member. The lessons from 2018, basically that was transferred, and I wish to identify it as lessons observed, member. The lessons observed is that as a society we are a bit, how should I put it this way? We are not taking comprehensive disaster risk management seriously on all factors. And those events were a wake-up call for us to understand that we live in a hazard-prone area, and the hazards to which Trinidad and Tobago is exposed to is not between June and December. So we had on the 21st of August an earthquake, the 22nd aftershocks, we had the flooding events. And that has allowed not only the ODPM, but I believe every member of society, every agency, to relook how they address and deal with issues of disaster risk management and disaster risk reduction. One of the greatest shocks to me was the rush for information after the 21st of August on the earthquake. And what the Seismic Research Unit and the UDPM have been doing for years, we just realized that the society was not taking those information to heart. So we are now trying to satisfy the needs of the population in gaining information on risk management, risk reduction, preparedness, how do agencies plan to maintain their staff, maintain their business operations in those issues. So overall, the major lessons that we, at this point in time, have to push harder with the issue of resilience, with all the agencies. Your ministry is also one of them in recent times in your plan. So we are working ahead in ensuring that ministries have planned. This is not a now fix. It will take the work of everybody, with particular reference to the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government and the Tobago House Assembly, coupled with the Ministry of National Security to advance this. So that's really the major lesson. More work needs to be done. The society, and I say society, or the needs to understand that risk management is a part of your daily life. It has to be your routine. Just as the concerns expressed by Chair, just by the acting PS comment, once those things happen, every member of society should have an interest. And it should not be a storm watcher party. It should be, how do I prepare? Am I ready? Is my neighbor ready? Do I know the issues my neighbor have? So that's the major lessons observed. Once we make those changes in society, I'll consider those as lessons learned. Member.
Well, I just saw the word thunder shower for the first time in a little while. The Met Office has a 2:10 p.m. bulletin on thunder showers in southwest Trinidad and the likelihood of rain in the rest of Trinidad into tonight. So what, in light, I'm specific about October 2018, what is the ODPM? It means that rain is upon us. What is the ODPM doing differently based on the events of October 2018?
The steps we have taken is to ensure that we have a greater level of coordination between the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government and other key stakeholders in this particular issue. We have advanced our community outreach program as far as we could. We have been engaged in the schools in their preparedness and the community. We have even gone as far as in recent times, and within the next 2 weeks we'll be allocating a series of stores and equipment to various agencies, including Ministry of Rural Development, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service, and the Defense Force as part of its preparation activity to ensure that there can be some level of support, especially to the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, based on the severity of the impact, and therefore have that level of preparedness to respond to those incidents. We maintain our collaboration with CDMA as the focal point, and also to ensure that should there be a severe incident within Trinidad and Tobago, the regional response mechanism can kick in to support Trinidad and Tobago on a request from the Cabinet.
That was a much better response, much more optimistic response. So,
Thank you.
What equipment would you, and I'm very happy to hear that some of the agencies have been provided with resources. So, what specific equipment have you made available that you believe would make the agencies better responsive in this upcoming wet season?
Some of the, let's call some of the major equipment identified, things like chest waders, wheelbarrows, pumps, generators. Some of these items will be left with the agencies, some will be loaned and returned. We, again, we are looking at providing maritime assets to some of the agencies coming out of the incident. While we are a maritime island, we are not a maritime state by jurisdictional boundaries. So issues of watercraft will be identified for critical agencies to be utilized as needed. Things like mosquito foggers, cleaning aids, cleanup aids, some of those are the equipments that will be given and some will be loaned to return at the end of the hurricane season.
Okay, so Captain, just to go back a bit, you spoke about schools and sensitizations of schools. And I just wanted to know where you all had reached with that, because we were given a schedule of schools starting from the 13th of November 2018. Today, according to the schedule, we should have reached Woodland Hindu Primary School in the Regional Corporation of Pinal Dibe Regional Corporation. So between the 13th of November 2018 and today, 20 schools would have been programmed. Has that target been met?
Chair, yes, that target has been met, and we have also really completed 25 schools in that particular period of time. So we have since advanced the program in 17 of the 40 municipal corporations. That also includes 6 special needs schools. This is in no way in competition to what has already been achieved by the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government. So in total, if we compile the efforts of both organizations, we would have at least covered at least 100 schools in getting those schools prepared to deal with the hazards that have been identified for Trinidad and Tobago. Okay,
so that in terms of your schedule, you have done 25 of the 27.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I don't have rural governments, Ministry of Rural Government and Rural Development and Local Governments schedule with me, so I just really wanted to zone in on yours.
Thank you.
And with respect to the special needs schools, how many of those you would have done?
6.
6. So that would be what, the school for the deaf and...
Lady Ho Choi, the National Center for Persons with Disability, Association for Education of New Beginners. That list, I'm just trying to get all those special schools that we have completed, Chair.
Okay, all right. So we could wait on that. You could give us a listing of
Yes, that could be provided.
So it means that more or less you're on target. You're just 2 behind, and I guess you could make up with respect to that. So I'm happy to hear, at least with respect to the schools. and this would be under the sensitization program.
Yes, ma'am.
Is the Digicel Foundation's Preparing for You program also in partnership with ODPM?
Yes, ma'am, that's ongoing also too.
And that's ongoing
Yes,
also. And in terms of the special needs identified under that, or the vulnerable communities, have any of those been attached? Like, for instance, I see here, I don't know if you have Appendix 2, Digicel Foundation Preparing for You Preliminary Training Program.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Right? So under that, I see about 10 should have been done so far. Have those 10 been done?
Yes, they have, ma'am.
And in terms of the special needs under this, in the appendix, all the special needs were identified as to be determined. So I see like Goodwill Industries, Lady Hotel Home, Memisma Center, and so on. Have any of those been done under this Preparing You program?
Yes, they have been done with the help of Digicel. At the point of the presentation of this report, it was to be detailed, and therefore the Public and Education unit of ODPM has been engaged and continue the work with Digicel on this particular initiative.
So when you told me 2,500, so there are two different programs.
Yes, ma'am.
Right? So that if you did Lady Ho Choi sensitization, and you did Lady Ho Choi under the Preparing You, you would count that as two different initiatives.
Yes, it would be appropriate to put it as two different.
So that it would have been done under the sensitization, and it's very likely it would have also been done. So that what I would ask you is if you will give us an update with respect to both programs, what schools and institutions have been covered.
Will do, Chair.
Thank you very much. Member Mark.
Good afternoon. I'd like to ask Captain Owen if you could probably share with us the acquisition of dinghies, because we know from the disaster that visited our country last year, October, a lot of citizens were stranded, particularly in places like Greenvale and other communities. And first responders didn't have access to that basic watercraft, or you call it maritime asset. Can you share with this committee, having regard to that disaster that we had last year and the clear shortage of supply from what I had seen? I may be wrong, but you can correct me. What efforts are we making, or have we made, to ensure that we have an adequate supply to deploy to all the regional corporations, so that as first responders, they will have that available? Because they have to be trained, because you have volunteers, I would imagine. So could you share with us what is available, what has been purchased?
Thanks for the question, member. First, allow me to just give a short history on this. The acquisition of marine assets has been ongoing by the ODPM for more than 8 years now. We have acquired assets that has been placed into the hands of the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force Engineer Battalion. They have at least 4 Zodiacs that we have purchased. Those Zodiacs were actually deployed on that eventful day in October in Standing Grande and had to be redeployed. We have since got assets donated to the ODPM, and we have since purchased assets to be further deployed and loaned to various agencies in the upcoming season. So that has been done notwithstanding other corporate and international donations that has been publicized, given to local government. So we have acquired assets to which we'll be shortly loaning to those respective agencies so that they can respond. But I would like to highlight to the member that, as I previously said, is that we are not a marine state. And based on the location of those assets, we can also, and I hope it does not happen, have an issue of deployment when it's really needed to those particular areas. So we are literally augmenting the assets that have been acquired by the Ministry of Rural Development. We're going to be strategically giving those assets to the regiment, both in the north and south, and also to the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service, which would therefore allow those first responding agencies who have trained personnel. So we would not be expending much energy and time on training persons to use those assets. Once those assets can be used, because the operation will dictate whether we use motors or we use oars, or persons wade themselves using those assets. So I don't want persons to have the false sense of security that once you have the assets, they have engine, they can be utilized in any theater of operation. That impact area will determine how those assets are deployed, and we will try to strategically locate them. So to finalize my answer to you, so that assets have been acquired and will be distributed to the respective agencies within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah. Is it a secret that you would not want to share with this committee at this time, as it concerns the quantum that would have been purchased for both the Defense Force, and that would also be deployed to members of the fire services who are trained to use these assets? Can you share with this committee how many we were able to acquire through purchases, how many were donated by corporate sponsors, so that the country that is looking at this activity would have some sense of assurance that we are preparing ourselves for any eventuality, and the state has acquired the appropriate assets in order to safeguard lives if and when we are confronted with a similar disaster as we witnessed last year. So I just wanted to know, Captain Wins, whether it is information that you consider to be highly sensitive, or whether it is information that you can share with this committee.
I can't share that information in preliminary. At this point in time, we have received 2 rubber dinghies donated from one private citizen and one corporate, which is Budget Marine, coming out of last year's incidents. We have at least 6 dinghies, 4 with motor, and 2 with motor and 4 without. The motor would be allocated to the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force Engineer Battalion and also to the Fire Service, along with the unmotorized assets to be strategically distributed across Trinidad and Tobago.
May I ask, Captain Wynn, from disaster preparedness perspective, what would you recommend as an adequate number given our recent experiences for holding and ultimately deploying in terms of a disaster? Do you think that the numbers that you have just shared with this committee, from your perspective, is adequate, or do you think that, for instance, we need to up the numbers, or that is adequate at this time?
Chair, based on the present impact that we have, and based on my information of what has already been even donated to local government, there is a need for a slight improvement. However, I will do that with caution, because those assets are expensive assets to maintain. The skill sets need to be maintained. And while there's a need to acquire these assets based on the incident in the past, a risk assessment has to be properly done based on occurrences, based on where they are. And also, that has to be supported by civil and community resources within those impacted areas. So therefore, if we look at maybe the woodland areas or any other area, what other marine assets exist within that particular geographic space that can be used into the right arrangement with those owners, that those assets can be deployed? Because I remember in October, we had issues even to the point of, and the minister did correct me after, there was an asset that we almost commandeered at the minister's office, and that's Minister of Agriculture, because, as I said, we are not a marine state. So while we were moving assets across, we cannot at this point in time predict where that incident is going to occur, but we are going to strategically place those assets. And this is where the preparedness of the population is going to assist us in even responding to those needs. That person just don't wait till the water reaches knee-high to start making movements, but can respond. So more can be acquired, but I go with caution once we do the necessary assessment, and then we could deal that, because remember, you also have to train those persons. And that's not one person you're training per vessel. For each vessel, you might need to train an entire crew of 3 or 4 operators, because when that incident happens, you need to ensure that you have resources available to man those vessels.
May I ask local government? We have heard what is being done to address the awareness, building of consciousness program and sensitization among physically challenged citizens, school children. What about communities within the 14 regional corporations? What sensitization programs, what kind of outreach programs have been conducted by the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government to sensitize members of our communities as to their readiness for disasters that would visit their communities? Can you share with this committee how many programs have been conducted? Where have they been conducted? How many citizens were involved? What organizations were engaged? So at least Trinidad and Tobago, well, Trinidad in this instance, TMI is in Tobago, we will have our understanding, and the country will have an understanding. Can you share with us?
Member, I'm so glad that you asked that question. The Ministry of Rural Development has changed the paradigm as with respect to how we respond to hazards that impact disasters. The most important thing is that we understand when a hazard impacts, the first person you would see is not a first responder. Someone from the fire, Coast Guard, Defense Force, the first person you would see is your neighbor. So what we have done is that we have started the Community Emergency Response Team Volunteer Training Program. And we started it off in March, April, it's May. We have almost completed 500 persons across communities in Shogunas, San Fernando, Tunapuna, Mayara Rio Claro, Sagre Grande, Bonaire West, San Juan, Port of Spain, and at the Ministry of Rural Development itself. Now, we can only train 50 persons at a time because it takes 4 days to do the training, because there are 8 modules which we cover: disaster preparedness, fire suppression, light search and rescue, disaster medical operations, the psychology of disaster, CERT, and terrorism. We also engage the communities in chainsaw use and safety, sandbag wall construction, and a range of things that they would need hands-on, so that we are hoping to, we have to explode this. Our aim at the ministry is to train 10% of the population. That is 130,000 people. To do that requires a different type of thinking. So that the ministry is, in the month of July, we are doing a symposium for NGOs, FBOs, and CBOs in how a role for NGOs, FBOs, and CBOs in disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. Here's what we are doing. If we can get every NGO, FBO, and CBO, we're talking about the ASHA, the TML, the Mahasabha, we're talking about the Catholics, every single organization, religious or otherwise, we are planning to train them with all these 8 modules. In all these 8 modules, train their professionals. For instance, we will have, in every organization, there are people who have firemen, psychologists, doctors, nurses. The 8 modules that I just outlined, we can teach those 8 modules to every organization. It means that they will now set the agenda. We will be mainstreaming disaster risk reduction and this CERT program in every community. Now, I would like to also say that all of this training was done, voluntarily, at no cost to the state. The individuals who we trained, they bought their own PPEs, they bought their own coveralls, because we are talking about volunteerism. And wherever we go, our coordinators are saying, this thing is getting out of hand, Mr. David. Too many people want to be trained. And last Sunday in San Fernando, we started, and we were expecting 40. We had almost 70 persons volunteering to come and do this thing. So that it means that the communities must start to build resilience. And that's the way to do it. Train them to be able to recognize, respond, and recover from hazards that impact their community. It's a community thing. With respect to the schools, the chairman asked, we have completed almost 100 schools at the Ministry of Rural Development. Today, tomorrow, every day of the week, throughout this country, schools are being, awareness programs are being done through the Ministry of Rural Development and local government. So that we are we know what we want to do. It's going to take some time, but with everybody on all hands on deck, all the organizations with us, we can change how response in Trinidad and Tobago is. Greenvale was exactly as it was supposed to be. The community members, when they realized that no one was coming their way, they got together, and I have videos that I use as my training videos, where they put their rope and they helped each other. That was community emergency response team working without being trained. And that's the way we intend to go at the ministry.
Yeah, thank you very much. May I ask whether there's a time frame that the Ministry of Rural and Local Government would have set itself as it relates to achieving the 10% of the population being trained voluntarily, which is over 100,000 people. And you have visited 100 schools. You didn't tell me it was primary or secondary or combination of both. But we know primary schools is close to 500, 450 to 500. Secondary schools are just under 100. Can you share with this committee what is your plan and the timeline to really get at our schools in the way that you have begun with the 100? Over what time frame you are anticipating? Between now and, let's say, well, the rainy season, as we are told, is upon us already. Can you share with us and so on some plan as it relates to achieving that objective?
Member, primary and secondary schools were done, and sometimes we would go into a school and we have to spend the entire day because of the number of classes, so we are going from class to class. Sometimes we do 3 and 4 sessions at a time in one school. And for instance, the San Fernando Regional Corporation, they have done 19 on their own. Rio Claro has done 15. It's an explosion of stuff, of things that is happening, and people are happy about it, and we love it.
All right. Well,
let me give you the answer.
No, it's all right. What I would like to suggest is that if you can put in writing, Permanent Secretary, that information, so we not, take up very valuable time dealing with the details. So maybe you can do that for us in writing. May I ask the Permanent Secretary or Deputy, you have a inadequate staffing problem, which is a major challenge at your various municipal corporations. Can you share with this committee what is the current situation with your staffing at the municipal corporations? Because they are critical in the disaster preparedness exercise. But if you have a shortage of staff, and of course we have volunteers, but you need those persons, engineers, health professionals within the regional corporation. So could you share with us what is the current state of play as it relates to staff shortage and what steps are being taken to address those shortages?
Thank you, through the Chair. My response to that concern goes beyond just disaster preparedness and disaster management. All the players at the corporations, all the stakeholders, the council, the trade union, the citizenry that depends on the services that the corporation provide will tell you that there is this deficiency. In fact, the corporations are operating with cadres of the daily rated staff that dates back to possibly the 1970s. Essentially, the challenge has been one of funding, as well as the challenges in getting resources as it relates to monthly paid officers. We are having dialogue with the DPA in terms of addressing that. In my humble view, and I am not a pessimist, but we are trusting that the local government reform initiative will bring about some change in this area. But at the same time, I also want to give you some assurance that with the limited staffing that exists at the corporations, they are in the process of all being mobilized to assist in the disaster management effort. The disaster management units that exist at the corporations sadly comprises of 4 individuals. Those are the specialist disaster management officers.
That's for each corporation?
For each corporation.
Could you tell this committee how many you require in order to have an adequate level?
I will respond to that question by indicating to you that TIMA in Tobago has over 10 times that amount.
TIMA?
That's correct.
Well, we better go to Tobago?
Well, we have gone to Tobago to get ideas from them. And the thing about it is that at TIMA, we have people who are volunteers and they are being also paid.
Okay.
But getting back to the deficiency in staffing, recognizing that we need to look at the concept of getting more for less, we have decided to mobilize, to equip, to train, and to get on board our employees at the corporations so that they can all be involved in this disaster.
What can we do to help you? What can this committee do to help you? Because disaster is around the corner. Climate change, as we are told by you, is here. It's real.
Well,
so we want to avoid disaster and losing of lives or the loss of lives. So can you tell us how can this committee help you by maybe guiding us on recommendations that you'd like us to consider?
My reasonable response would be to give the corporations what it critically needs, which is filling the current vacancies and providing us with the finances that we have been allocated, beginning with disaster preparedness.
And Madam Chair, may I just ask one question? Because I'm waxing warm and I have many questions, but I know that I have other colleagues here. So let me go to the Ministry of Agriculture and ask the Ministry of Agriculture. I know that we have had some challenges and you, that is the ministry, would have been putting systems in place to improve processing of flood claims. And you would have developed a verification process and to assess claims when providing flood relief assistance to farmers. Can you share with us what is the current status with your new attempt at improving the processing of flood claims by farmers? Because you did say in your opening that new systems and new structures are being strengthened. So can you share with us how farmers are faring with that particular approach?
Okay, good afternoon again. So that when we would have reported on the last occasion, we would have indicated, well, emanating from the discussions, that there were duplications. Many of the counties were using different forms for the different processes. The processes were different from county to county. So what we have done over the past year, among other things, we have started to streamline. We process mapped all the different activities that would go into processing a claim, so that we have now about standardized how we should process a claim. And the forms that were in many different variations, we have just about reached with the assistance of our strategic partners to develop one standardized form, which, when approved, that will be used in this coming fiscal for the rainy season when it starts. So in terms of really looking at our processes, we anticipate that once those are implemented, those are the short term, of course, because eventually we would like to, we have updated, well, not as yet, but I have given approval for the update of our website, so that eventually, as we go to the medium term, the farmers, we expect claims to be processed in a different manner. We'll be using a more electronic means, and that will even speed up the processing time for our claims at this time.
Madam Chair, one final question. I know that the Central Audit Unit currently is examining your draft final recommendations. Can you share with this committee what is the current status of those recommendations from the Central Audit Committee, and where are we with that whole exercise?
We have not received that final report as yet, but based on what I would have seen, not privileged to share at this point, but we would have looked at, you could have categorized them into policies and processes. So that is why we would have attacked the processes to streamline the operations.
But what is holding back the final exercise? Can we get from the Ministry of Finance what is causing the Central Audit Committee to be holding up your final draft?
I believe, I'm sorry, that came through, I believe that went to Cabinet, from them. But that's my understanding of it.
All right, Madam Chair. So maybe she comes back. Yeah, I'll pause at this time, Madam Chair, to oh, somebody.
Okay, can I now invite Member Dionarine? I thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the ODPM, now I know one of our recommendations during our last inquiry, we would have recommended that you all develop a manual stating the roles and responsibilities of the ODPM. And in your submission to us, you indicated that currently the manual is at the stage where you all are conducting internal stakeholder consultations. Can you provide us with the status of this internal stakeholder consultation exercise, please?
Thank you for the question, member. That has been completed, and we are about to enter the process to do the final proofreading and publishing of the manual.
Okay, so who are the internal stakeholders that the ODPM consulted
The internal
with?
stakeholders will be from a peer review from members within the various units of the ODPM, and that was conducted based on that peer review. And as I said, we are now in the process of printing that instrument to be published to the wider community.
So when should we expect publication and availability to the wider public?
Availability to the wider public at this point in time will be electronic, and I am hoping at least at the end of this month that could be done. Printing for wider distribution has to be now assessed and cost and the necessary tender documents before we could do that. But our first publication would be electronic on our social media and using the various state agencies reposted on their respective websites.
Okay, so I'm assuming that you will be using social media and so on to publicize the manual.
Yes, member.
Okay. Now, I want to ask a few questions on the Preparing You program. Now, what is the total cost of this Preparing You program? Because I understand it is a combination of the Digital Foundation and the Inter-American Development Bank.
I don't have the full course with me at this point in time, but that collaboration would see approximately 900 students being involved based by the funding approved by the Digital Foundation and the IADB. I could provide the committee with that total cost based on the funding arrangement between the two entities for further clarification.
Okay, we will be grateful to receive that. Now, in your submission, I understand that you all had an initial assessment of all the schools, is it all the schools, to see whether they are disaster prepared?
We developed a tool which would allow a safe school program, and therefore through a tool to allow for that assessment of schools. That is going also in hand with a Safer School program that we would be engaging in within the next month through the USAID OFDA in preparing school teachers in a Safer School program, which has two components, the certification part and then allowing selected persons to do train the trainer. So basically we are developing the tools to assist the school community to do that. While simultaneously we are also assisting the Ministry of Education in the development of its all-hazard emergency operation plan for the entire Ministry of Education.
Okay, so initially now I understand that the Giselle Foundation would have conducted site visits. How many schools the Giselle Foundation conducted site visits for? I'm trying to understand how you all ended up with 6 schools under the Preparing You program. Am I correct? It's 6 schools, right?
Yeah. All of the schools and homes selected were basically catered for special needs who have learning disabilities and mobility challenge. And the foundation assessed the vulnerability to disasters as well as key gaps in the preparedness to evaluate these schools. So they have selected the schools based on a criteria they have selected, and therefore, once that assessment was done for this particular project, those schools were selected by Digicel, and then the ODPM, in collaboration, commenced the program with them. So they would have initially, based on their criteria, selected the schools to go through the training, and based on that analysis with the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service and other agencies, then selected those schools, and we then pursued the program with them.
Okay, so they were the most vulnerable schools?
Based on the criteria selected by Digicel.
Okay. Now, does any component of this program include upgrade to infrastructure and facilities? Can you give us some examples?
To the best of my knowledge, ma'am, no. But it does not include what I consider physical upgrade, but some recommendations we made. Some tools, some aids might be provided, but basically it's equipped with persons to deal with the various hazards of those respective schools.
Okay. Now, I also understand, based on your submission, that you all are developing a comprehensive mechanism for documenting lessons learned in, and it is currently being finalized. Can you provide us with, first of all, shed some light on what this comprehensive mechanism is? I know you would have submitted it to the committee. However, for the listening public, could you shed some light on the details of this comprehensive mechanism and also the status?
The comprehensive mechanism is basically to allow the ODPM to engage in a holistic review of activities by all agencies where necessary and capture the data that would allow for future planning and a holistic approach. That has been difficult. As a society, we don't collect data. The ODPM has been swamped with requests for data from the impact, and even from the agencies who are requesting the data from, we have not even received the data from them. So if you ask me what's the cost of the October impact, I'll be quite honest, member, I cannot give you the cost unless we look at what is expended from government fund. So that mechanism is being engaged now to collect those baseline data to set that mechanism to which impact data can be, raw data can be collected and analyzed with all the resources so that we can provide the necessary data. Emergency risk management is now an evolving field of study, and therefore, as a society and as an organization, we have had requests as far as Italy from nationals who are studying for data on impact, to which some can be provided, and we are still struggling for some. So that after-action mechanism is also part of the pre-impact mechanism from a holistic approach that will allow us to capture pre-impact data to facilitate impact response, and they provide the necessary data to agencies as to allow planning, because we need a holistic approach, taking all the efforts, as we look at our sustainable development, as we look at resilience, we cannot continue to develop without taking risk management into consideration. Ensure that our buildings are properly built in the right locations and the relevant nexus. So that is what it is. It is not a now and finish event, member. It requires all of government and all of community approach, and we are slowly getting all the relevant agencies on board so that we can continue this initiative.
Okay, so do you have in mind an estimated timeline to conduct this baseline exercise?
At present, we have commenced a project with the Pacific Disaster Center in collecting the baseline study. It is expected to be completed within a year, literally. But that project has started. That team is expected in Trinidad during the course of next week to conduct in-country site visits to various agencies collecting the data. So it's an ongoing project with 3 phases. We have just completed the kickoff phase. And as I said, that particular agency would be in Trinidad next week, again, based on support from the U.S. government to complete that phase of the project.
Okay. Would you be so kind to share with us in writing the details of these 3 phases of that project, please?
Will do, ma'am.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I'll pause at this time.
Okay, so, Mr. David, I just want to ask something in terms of, I'd seen a press release talking about the CERT program. I think that's what you're developing. So, in terms of, they were saying in that ad that participants get an opportunity to sort of acquire a sort of toolkit. And if I understand you well, that is really because people are required to bring their own gloves, bring their own torchlight, and so on, to take part in the modules and the simulation exercises.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so that it's not that tools are given to you or aids are given to you. To participate, you must probably given a list of things you have to come with.
Yes, Chairman, what we do to make it easier, we say for the first module, you come, you walk with your glove and a torchlight. The second module, you walk with a helmet and a vest. Mm-hmm. By the time the program is finished, and you realize that you have already built your kit all by yourself, mm-hmm. and it's your kit, mm-hmm. for your family, for your community, so that when something happens, you respond with it. And we used to do it the other way, Madam Chair. We used to do it the other way, and we found that people never valued it very much. Yeah. But when they have bought it themselves, they treat it well, and they do come out and respond.
Okay. So I just want to ask something. In terms of the ad, I think might have been when, in March?
It's in March.
So between March and now, you have trained 500 people?
500 persons.
And you were targeting initially five municipalities?
Yes.
So that the 500 people are spread across those 5 municipalities, or you've gone into other municipalities?
We have had to, people were so interested that we had to go into other communities. For instance, San Fernando was not one of the original ones, but San Fernando has almost 100. We went into Kelly because of Kelly, St. Helena, Warrenville, that area there, because that was affected last year. And luckily for us, the Red Cross stepped in, and they provided us with the training modules. They assisted us with the disaster medical operations, and they sponsored the PPEs for Kelly, St. Helena, Situna Puna, Mayara, Rio Claro, and also Sandy Grande. So we had to train 50 persons. They told us that was their limit. So that's 150 persons were themselves, but the Red Cross supported that effort, but all the others volunteer.
Okay, let me ask one other thing, and I'll leave this alone. In your selection of volunteers, okay, because they say people sign up, sometimes people are so eager, you have more people signing up than you anticipated for your program. do you look for a spread across the communities? Or let's say, for instance, I can only talk about the community I'm best familiar with. If you are CEO in the Digo Martin Regional Corporation, okay, and you were looking for 50 volunteers, would all 50 come from Monkoko?
I'm glad you talked about Digo Martin. I was the disaster coordinator in Digo Martin, Milady, and I have established many CERT teams so that Carenage will have one CERT team. We try to recruit in clusters because if we recruit people, 50 persons spread across a large area, one person will be isolated by himself when a hazard impacts a community and he has no support. So what we do, we are recruiting in clusters so that you will have for instance, in Maraval, you will have a team, but you will need a team not only for Paramin, a team by itself, and then you will need a team for Simeon Road, all by itself. Right. So you're recruiting in clusters. And we tell them that, and that is what is causing the explosion now. When they come to the program, like they would come Saturday for the program, and I would say, who is from Belmont? And they would say, well, 3 of us. I say, well, what are 3 of you are going to do if something happens in Belmont by yourself? So you need now to bring 10 persons. And you will see the other day, the next day, you will see they come with a team of 8. Okay. We have a start. And that's how we plan to explore the thing throughout every community in the country.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Let me just ask the acting deputy PS in local government. I've seen an ad, job description, contractual position, 21 disaster management field officers. I think this would be in terms of filling your vacancies. How was the response to that ad? I think the closing date would have been sometime in April.
In all fairness to you, Madam Chair, I really cannot provide a specific response to your question. However, what I know as of yesterday, we were placing a lot of emphasis on receiving those applications and subsequently to engage in the interviews.
All right, so you haven't filled the positions as yet?
Not yet. The incumbents are still out there, and we have managed to get the support of the Permanent Secretary to briefly extend their contracts until the new employment situation is addressed.
But you do have bodies?
Yes.
You do have bodies?
Yes, we do.
And I think every corporation should have 2?
2 field officers, yes.
That's, all right. Are there existing 2 field officers in your 14 municipal corporations as we speak?
I would, Mr. David will be able to give you a more accurate response if he is allowed to do so.
Are you?
Madam Chair, we have, there are only 3 corporations that has 1 field officer, and those positions will be filled, and that's Couva. Point Fortin is now, will have to be replaced. And 1 other corporation, Digo Martin Regional Corporation, needs a disaster coordinator. Since I have been moved from Digo Martin to the ministry. But those are the positions, but we have bodies on the ground. The folks are there now. So if something happens now, we can respond.
No, just so that I don't get too confused, Mr. David.
Yes, ma'am.
So do I understand that 11 corporations have 2 field officers?
Yes, ma'am.
And only 3 have 1. And the disaster coordinator is another position.
Yes, ma'am.
Digo Martin is the only one that does not have. So the other 13 would have a disaster coordination.
Yes, ma'am.
Coordinator. Okay?
Yes, and there are two municipalities that don't have communication technicians.
Right.
We have advertised for those, and those should be filled when interviews are due very soon.
Okay, so likely filled by when?
I am saying by next week, they tell me we're going to have interviews. HR is telling me that we're going to have interviews by next week, Monday. I hope they do, but if not, the latest the following week.
All right, so Mr. Deputy PS, if you could keep us, and we'll give you a timeline, a price of the ongoing scenario with this. And just before I leave you, Mr. Deputy PS, I need a little clarification about these standard operating procedures that are supposed to apply in the municipal corporations. I think the standard operating procedure is supposed to assist in the shortages both of all resources, human and mechanical, in the event of a, Captain, when the proper word here is a hazard or incident or what? What's the proper word? An event?
Hazard impact.
Yes, in the event of a hazard impact. It's a sort of like brother help sister kind of thing. These standard operated procedures that you've set out here, which are 25, how in a practical way do those operate, and how does permanent secretary manage it, or has oversight over that? Because when you say to me, let me give for an example, the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, through its 14 municipal corporations, directs that each corporation develop capacity to provide the personnel to go interaction at prompt and efficient response time. I don't know what that means, but it may have a meaning. So how does a PS ensure that?
My response to your question, Madam Chair, begins with understanding the corporation structure being an entity that has both a political directorate as well as the administrative arm, which is led by the Chief Executive Officer. So while the PS at the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government would have oversight over the corporations, it is expected that the CEO, in consultation with his or her council, will be the main decision makers. What our senior disaster management coordinator, the role that he plays is to ensure that what is expected of the corporations is communicated very clearly. So, for example, as was the case as recent as last night, where there was this fire that was of concern in Point Fortin, close to the Wapo landfill site, I would have gotten a message from Mr. David indicating that Point Fortin Borough Corporation was unable to handle that matter on its own and that we needed support. So while he has direct communication links with the disaster management coordinators of the corporations, we have the CEO now that will require some kind of green light to proceed in assisting Point Fortin. So that is where the PS's office comes in. So I would have messaged the CEOs of the corporations where help was required and informed them that, listen, we need your water tender to go to Point Fortin to put out that fire, right? And that message alone will signal to them that they can proceed to do that. However, we have also been engaging the CEOs and explaining to them what is level 1, what is level 2, what is level 3. So they are now beginning to understand their roles. We are grateful for the understanding of the political entities in supporting these initiatives as it relates to disaster preparedness and management. So essentially what you will have at the corporations, regardless of how deficient our resources are, is that we have now teams being developed to support the disaster management unit in preparation and in readiness for possible events. So this, in a nutshell, is how it is.
Okay. So I understand that in terms of people, the people.
Right.
How do you ensure oversight over adequate, appropriate working equipment?
Madam Chair, this is a matter that ironically we are trying to address at this point in time. I would have responded to a previous question by member Mark as to what we need. We need the money, right? I am trusting that the relevant authorities will provide reasonably what is due to us based on our budgetary allocations for this fiscal year. One area that we are struggling in is with respect to the upkeep of vehicles. We need vehicles in times like these. Backhoes, trucks, etc., etc.
Only need, you need working ones. Okay?
So that we are very hopeful and optimistic that following this session, we will have something to smile about.
All right, so let me ask you, so I want to ensure that you're hopeful and optimism based on something real. Have you made a case to the Ministry of Finance with respect to the allocation and how releases impacts on your ability to direct that there are adequate, appropriate working equipment available at the municipal corporations to be deployed to the affected sites where necessary?
Madam Chair, I want to present some figures to you. And as I indicated before, the needs of our ministry is not unreasonable. The demands are not unreasonable. For example, there are votes, line items that treat with disaster preparedness under both the PSIP and the recurrent. So, just to respond to your question, we have a situation where the total allocation for all 14 corporations for the natural disasters is $2.357 million. I have been reliably informed that the corporations would have applied for these fundings and for this funding, and all we have received so far was close to $131,000. Right? The hurricane season begins, it has begun already. Under the PSIP, we have applied for, as direct releases of close to $3.1 million, and we have gotten $0.94 million released thus far. We have also applied for close to $2 million for confirmation of funds. Of close to $2 million, we have gotten the confirmation for, of $500,000. So if we get these funds, we will be able to manage.
Well, maybe I now turn to the PS Finance to ask whether Mr. Seapole should continue in his very optimistic state.
Well, I'm not specifically aware of the items that he has listed. So what we can do is look within the ministry and see where the requests are and deal with them
Okay, so I'm going to ask a facetious question. So, Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, you don't speak to Ministry of Finance? Okay.
Madam Chair,
Next question. Member Mark.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Yes, Madam PS, Susan Leachy. I would like you to clarify for us the current status of the draft report submitted to the Central Audit Committee by the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, read a comprehensive review of payments to farmers, and to inform this committee what is the status of the final recommendations from the Central Audit Committee. Can you advise us what is the current status? Has that report been completed and returned to the relevant ministry?
Member, I believe the report has been completed, but I would have to get back to you on the current status and the recommendations. I don't have that specific information in front of me.
So you'll put that in writing?
Yes, we will get
Signed
back
to the
to you in
Secretary.
writing.
And Madam Chair, may I ask, as I'm on the floor, ask Mr. David, you sound like a pastor, but let me just ask Mr. David, whether you have any help, because I know you are doing a lot of work based on what you have said, but within the Ministry of Rural and Local Government, do you have a team of people that you operate, or is there a team or unit that you head that would be responsible for the sensitization and building public awareness and outreach programs? Or are you a one-man crew that have to undertake all these projects on your own? Can you share with this committee?
Member, the team of persons that do the training, for instance, for CERT, include the Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society, because they do the module that is disaster medical operation. Right. And I must thank Mr. Stefan Kishore and Mr. Augustus Ford. They are two who have been with us. We have other coordinators who have special skills. For instance, our coordinator in Arima, she has a master's in criminology and another master's in another skill, so that she does the modules terrorism and CERT, and she will do the psychology of disaster. We have 4 firemen working with us, one of whom was at the search and rescue in Santa Cruz, so he will do the light search and rescue, and they will do the fire suppression. So it's a team of us, and from all coordinators, outside of us we have the Red Cross Society, and they help us also, and we do this training every weekend. I have not been at home for the last so many weekends because I'm out there on the field training and building resilience in communities, because I think that's the only way that we can withstand the onslaught of a serious hazard that could impact us at any time.
So in terms of the training unit, are you the only person in that unit in the ministry, or do you have help?
Yes, we have. At the ministry itself, we have not used any of the folks there, because it's technical stuff on the field, and the coordinators, the disaster coordinators, they possess those skills, and they are the ones who come out every weekend without fail and do these programs. We have brought it midweek also, and we had people come out, 60 people come out midweek. You would not believe this. 60 persons in a community come out midweek, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for this training. At Kent House, we opened it up to the staff at Kent House, and we had to do 2 sessions because it was too many people to do 1 session. So we have completed Tuesday, Friday, and then we have started again. And people would like to know that they can be prepared if something happens to them, their families, and their communities. So that's where we are at the ministry. And to answer your question, I used to be a preacher.
Oh, Mr. Sipol, can you share with this committee the question the chairman raised earlier? If Diego Martin is the only regional body that is without a disaster coordinator, and we are just, shy away from the rainy season, can you inform this committee what steps are being taken by your ministry to have that vacancy filled forthwith?
I'm sure, Madam Chair, that this matter will be addressed very, very quickly. But let me also say, and something that Mr. David didn't mention to you, is that he also provides some amount of oversight to Diego Martin, although he is attached to the ministry. And I know that he would have his colleagues there at the disaster management unit who are in constant communication with him, so that in essence, Diego Martin isn't deficient in any way. But that position will be filled. I am not in a position to say when, but I guarantee you that it will be treated with a matter of urgency.
Okay, ma'am. Thanks very much.
Okay. All right. So I'm going back now to the Ministry of National Security. And in terms of the core program, which we were told in your response that communities will be engaged at on a smaller scale through some community outreach exercise, while you're planning to relaunch the core program. Could you give us some sort of insight with respect to what this small-scale engagement is, if it started, how it's being implemented, and also when is it that the core program is envisaged to come back on stream?
Thank you, Chair. Since we last met, the core program is ongoing. We have done activities with the Girl Guides Association, the Blind Welfare Association, TSTT, Nature Seekers, and one of the cleanup campaign. We have on the agenda for the next month or so to do core activities at the major city centers hub of PTSC, to which we try to sensitize those traveling persons on some of their roles and responsibility through a public awareness campaign. So it is envisioned in the month of June that will be deployed to Citygate, San Fernando, Arima, the water taxi terminals, Port of Spain, and San Fernando. And we are also proposing that TEMA also conduct on our behalf and in their interests the same at the Scarborough terminal. So that, Chair, will encompass some of the activities that CORE will be pursuing based on our present structure to ensure that the program continues and we reach as much persons as possible.
So, if I understand you well, Captain Wind, CORE has been relaunched?
Yes.
So the financial and human constraints that you are suffering, you've been able to find a way around that?
Yes, Chair, we have been able to find a way, and as the PS said, once that recruitment process, we'll be able to revamp it in its full flight.
Okay. Now, let me ask about this virtual vision application, which we learned was very beneficial in Tobago, and which you all felt was of some, would be of some value in Trinidad. And I think you all had gone as far to say that you had got some agreement through CDIMA that this program could be launched in Trinidad at no cost to Trinidad and Tobago. What has been the development with this?
Through the agreement with CDIMA and the Telecommunication Union, we have been able to acquire the software package and presently doing some trials with the virtual vision, and that's similar to what Tobago has. It is at no cost at this point in time for the next 18 months once we kick it off, after which Trinidad and Tobago will have to take the course of renewing the license and all this sort of thing. So we have acquired that particular software, and we are now setting it up, doing the trials, and we'll be launching it once we have completed the initial setup and trials.
Time frame?
Right now, I could say at the end of the month, middle of June for the latest, and then we push
the trials will be finished
yes,
by the middle of June?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let me ask PS, Ministry of National Security, in terms of next 18 months, my maths might be a little off. If that time for the licenses will be in the new fiscal year, would you all have taken that into account in your preparation for your budgetary requests for fiscal 2019-2020?
Yes, Madam Chairman, we've taken that into account, along with...
Your submission has gone in already, has it?
No.
No?
No.
But you will be taking it into account for the submission?
Certainly.
Yeah. Okay. Member Rambarat?
Thank you very much. I have two questions to each of rural development, ODPM, and maybe 4 to rural development, sorry. Mr. Wint, I listened attentively to your discussion on the assets, particularly what you describe as the marine assets. No matter how much rainfall, there are 5 areas are going to be affected: Piarco, St. Helena, Oropun, Woodland, Mafikin, and the stretch of road from Sangre Grande to Mayaro. As you know, the experience has been, while the assets are available, it is one issue is the time it takes, because the assets are based in Chaguaramas. We've spent days waiting on support to reach to Mafikin and Mayaro, and we've had instances where when the support reach the officers to manage it, they've come to the end of their workday, and the assets have had to return to Chaguaramas and then come back the next morning. We've had situations where the wrong assets have reached. We've had situations where assets have reached, but they can't be offloaded because the support equipment like a HIAB has not arrived. I am convinced that, and you've talked about security, positioning, and all of that. I am convinced that these assets and the people have to be positioned way in advance, because we lose a lot of time, and some of the frustrations come from having to wait for these assets to be located. Our ministry, for example, and in state land, we have sites that are available, and the assets don't have to be there for weeks, but hours before they could be positioned, because I could tell you from today where the floods are going to hit when the rain comes down. And that is my concern listening to you. The second thing is, I don't think I've heard or read anything so far about patient transport. So you have some parts of the country, for example in Woodland, you could head further southwest if you have a medical issue and avoid the flood. Or you could head to San Fernando, depending on where you're located. But again, in Mayaro, we transport patients and the staff, medical staff, continuously through floodwaters. And for a long time, I've been saying that either people be trained to manage, because we take a certain amount of risks, but I've not seen a vehicle that is equipped to move through the waters, the water that will come between Rio Claro and Mayaro in the Mafikin location. So once again, we're going into a period of potential rain, and we would have issues with moving medical patients and hospital staff from Rio Claro to Mayaro and from Mayaro to Sangre Grande. And that situation is relatively unique to that part of the country, because other areas have other options when waters come up. So that is my two questions to you, and then I'll ask Rural.
Thanks for the question, member. As it relates to prepositioning of those assets in relation, and I will say this now, one of the lessons observed and the lessons that would have been learned is that the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force has collaborated its initiative. Where the 1st Engineer Battalion, based on Cabinet Note, was the operational arm for the ODPM, they have now engaged in a one-force effort, which means all the formations are now involved, as was demonstrated in October last year. So we can now see the issue of prepositioning with those assets based on once the agencies that are responsible for the early warning in this particular case issues the necessary notifications, and we can assess the weather data, preposition persons to so respond. Would the personnel be ever sufficient? Again, the impact will determine where that is. As it relates to the patient transport, as a country, we do have a problem with patient transport. The only agency I know that has vehicle to some level to deal with that is the 1st Engineer Battalion, what is considered a snorkel truck. Most of our vehicles, by all agencies, the exhausts are low. The Engineer Battalion has re-engineered their vehicles to put the exhaust high. So as you look at patient transport, it now requires a level of expenditure and the issuing of the relevant specifications. And that's why when I spoke about understanding the risks. So when Ministry of Works is buying or the real government is buying, we don't just buy the conventional trucks or vehicles or ambulance or low. We now have to look at, based on the hazard impact, to buy those vehicles that would allow those patient transfer. This too will take time, whether how that is programmed, either through recurring expenditure or PSIP, but these are some of the things that will need to be done to answer those questions. So I do anticipate that we'll have some level of patient transfer issues, and in some cases, corporate society has donated some of the high-end, what I call off-the-road quarry trucks, in some cases as seen last year, to assist some communities in moving persons. But that is one of our national deficits that I'm hoping that with the level of education and understanding of our risk profile, that agencies would acquire these vehicles to assist in some level of response in the various agencies and communities as the impact occurs.
Okay, and to rural development, I have two questions, two to the Deputy Permanent Secretary, but anybody could answer these two quick questions. Based on the experience last year, October, particularly in St. Helena, what changes have we made to the handling of heavy waste? As you know, in St. Helena, Greenville, the volume became so much that the agencies were double handling, placing it in a particular site and then later on removing it. And because sometimes we didn't have access to the dump, we found a lot of trucks parked along the way, loaded and parked along the way, because they couldn't move to a site to dump, and that caused traffic jams, that caused delay. So how are we handling heavy waste differently as we approach the wet season? That's the first question. And the second question is, how are we handling dead animals in this upcoming period? The experience from St. Helena, Madras, Las Lomas, it was the first time for example, for my first time having to deal with livestock at that level, and it was a deficit, as Mr. Wynn say. How are we preparing ourselves to deal with dead animals in the upcoming season?
With respect to the temporary transfer station, that's what we normally call it. My experience has been, and where we have had to move almost 400 truckloads of debris out of Diego Martin. So what we did is that and I think this is what, and you're asking a relevant question, how we do it. We had the transfer station operating during the day, but we brought in huge heavy trucks, 10-wheelers, in the night, got the dump opened. We spoke with the CEO of the swim call, and we were operating even after 12 o'clock. But so that you need to move the stuff out, but the road towards the dump is filled with traffic. And then when you go to the dump, there are trucks lined up. And we found that out. So what we did, we moved everything by large amounts at night.
All I'm asking is there a plan
for
this year?
Yes. The chairman spoke of the SOP. In the SOP, there is...
No, I'm not talking about the SOP because you see, you have the SOP in our office somewhere. I am on the road. Is there a plan? Have transfer stations been identified? Have we determined whether we need additional transfer stations in other parts of the country? And do we have a plan to truck waste by day or by night? And do we have access to the dumps? So if you're trucking by night, you have access to the dump at night.
All of that, member, has been arranged before and can be done now.
Right.
And once I am there at the ministry, and it falls to me, it will happen because I have done it several times before.
And if you're not there?
Well, we will get the next person will be left with this that tells them exactly how to do it.
Okay. And the animal carcass?
The animal carcass, last year, CPEP was involved, I think, was involved in moving we are yet to develop SOPs of how we treat with large amounts of chickens, for instance, and if we have lots of dairy cows and other types of animals. I have been speaking to the folks at Agriculture. I have been speaking with Ms. Anne-Marie Dardine about some of those things, and we are working to develop an approach to that because it's real. I know what you're saying is real. It's there, and we have never looked at that before because it has not occurred in that mass before. So we are going to develop a SOP together with using CPEP and the Ministry of Agriculture. Give us a little chance. In a month's time, Ms. Dardine and I will figure out how we're going to do that.
Mr. David, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, sir.
For now, to the Deputy Permanent Secretary, I have two questions. The first is, you talked throughout about lack of resources and all of that. But I've never had the opportunity to ask this question. And the question is, have you made an assessment of the resources available at all the municipalities in terms of things stored in containers? For example, I remember in Rio Claro, Mayaro, we're trying hard to get certain things to be able to facilitate relief, and discovering that you have containers upon containers, like in the beach area, of things that are available, but it's under the custody of somebody. And by the time the containers are opened, the stuff is expired, some damaged, and so on. And every time we have this battle of access to resources which we know or are told exists, but is not available. Now, I will say last year, in particular October 2018, we did not have a problem simply because the minister established something in Orange Grove that was available to everybody. But have we assessed at a corporation level the state of those things that are in containers?
And the answer is yes. The experience of October 2018, has really caused us to begin to think outside of the box. What I will say with respect to what you are asking is that we have inventories of those items that you refer to, disaster relief items, equipment, small equipment that will be required in such situations. These inventories are always updated on a regular basis. And in addition to that, we have asked the disaster management coordinators of the corporations to identify what their needs are, so that we will be able to mobilize from one corporation to another in terms of fulfilling those needs in event of such situations. Mr. David, he is on the ball with respect to liaising closely with his fellow disaster management coordinators at the corporations. And they have such an intimate relationship in that whenever the needs of one corporation can be satisfied by another, that takes place in a very smooth manner. So we do have something in place. Again, my concern, and I just want to re-emphasize, we need our funding to provide, to ensure that we top up corporations with the necessary relief items in readiness for the coming hurricane season. We need funding to have our vehicles repaired. And once these needs, basic needs, are satisfied, we will be in a state of readiness.
Right, and the last question goes back to your comment about the establishments, having establishments dating back to the 1970s. And it occurred to me that in that time you've gone through county council, municipal corporations. Some municipals have evolved into boroughs, and some boroughs have evolved into city corporations. And my question is twofold. Why has it taken so long? If you're talking about 1970s establishments, why has it taken so long to be transformed? And two, exactly what are your expectations from local government reform in relation to this particular issue?
I will try by responding to you by saying that your second question is the answer to the first. Yes, the local government system has evolved from county councils to municipal corporations, but you realize that what would have happened in the establishment of municipal corporations was really not something, in my humble view, that was not was properly thought out. When county councils no longer existed, you would have found that, I think I'll be best able to explain by using a scenario. In the case of corporations in the South, the Penal-Lebe Regional Corporation was established, where a piece of the former Victoria County Council and the former St. Patrick County Council both were merged into Penal-Lebe Regional Corporation. right? And then you would now have Siparia as the remaining entity and the Princestown Corporation as the other remaining entity further to the east. What you would have found then at these corporations, there were no properly thought out establishments. You had a makeup team. Certain members of staff, both daily rated and monthly paid, were diverted to the new corporations that were established. And that has never changed. There has been strong pleas from many stakeholders for this deficiency to be addressed over the decades, but it has never happened. And this is why I'm saying that your second question may be the answer to your first, where I would have intimated earlier that possibly through local government reform, this would be addressed.
Are you saying that municipal corporations should have a core establishment and maybe based on geography or other factors, specialized stuff, but a core establishment?
Certainly, and especially now that the intention is to give more autonomy to corporations, we need to look at things in this scientific way. We need to collect empirical data so that when we make decisions, these decisions will be translated into fulfilling the mandate of the entities that exist.
Okay, Member Diona, right?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the Permanent Secretary of Ministry of Finance, first of all, I want to thank you for your detailed submission in terms of explaining to the committee how the contingency fund is usually activated. And based on your submission, I saw that the contingency fund was accessed in 2017 for approximately 44.5 million, and then in 2012 for 60.6 million. Now, when ministries submit to the Ministry of Finance a request for financing through the contingency fund, is there a verification process in place by the Ministry of Finance?
First of all, the request has to go to Cabinet because the contingency fund is really an authority to make funds available over and above the budgeted amount. So the first, the specific ministry would go to Cabinet, and the Cabinet, based on the Cabinet approval, that is what would trigger the excess payments. So I suppose the answer is yes, the authority is Cabinet.
Would conduct a verification.
Well, the ministry would justify the request to Cabinet, and Cabinet would give the approval to access the additional funds.
Okay, all right, thank you. To the ODPM. Now, I recall from August 2018 when we had the earthquake. Within minutes, TSTT lines were down. Digital lines were down. And also I recall with Hurricane Brett, Tropical Storm Brett, sorry, some areas were left without electricity for some more than 24 hours in some instances. I in Princestown was left without electricity for almost more than 24 hours. What is the collaboration, what collaboration is in place with the TSTT and TNTEC and the ODPM to ensure that there's a swift response mechanism to situations like that? Because both instances were not entirely severe. If you look at a scale from 1 to 10, it was maybe about 6. But God forbid if something has to happen that is of a scale 8 or 9. What is in place to ensure state agencies are collaborated with to prevent?
Thanks for the question, member. There is collaboration between the ODPM and these relevant agencies as named. These agencies, through their business continuity models, have developed a rigorous resilience mechanism to respond to these incidents. The severity of the incident will determine the speed to which these agencies will respond. And therefore, if we have a 8, God forbid, we will have to survive without some level of service until these agencies can rebound. I say this having survived Hurricane Maria in Turks and Caicos, to which 90% of the island had no power, no communication, and therefore having also been in Haiti, where being in a city that had no electricity for more than 6 months. And therefore, it is a reality we have to face as we prepare ourselves, because the agencies also have to rely on their business continuity plan to ensure that their members of staff are available. They can pre-position. If our road networks are down, if lines are down, lines have to be mobilized. So there are varying contributing factors which can cause a utility agency not to be able to restore its service and return to its operational point objective within a reasonable time. They have set their objectives, they have mobilized and deployed assets to so do. The severity of the incident, I will repeat, will determine how fast that could be done. At this point in time, they have been quite successful in bringing back some of these things. You spoke about having no electricity. There were substations that were underwater, and therefore safety procedures did not allow T&Tech to go into some of these substations until the water subsided. So there were other contributing factors that allowed electricity not to be reactivated in some cases. TSTT, again, they're being based on usage and the shock of the event. Some cell towers crashed because of overburden. The vibration caused minor disruption, but they too, within a reasonable time, was back up and allowed their customers to continue service. But I am confident that these utility agencies can restore within time. The severity will test how fast that is. But I also appeal to every member of the community to also prepare yourself to live without these devices should they have, as you say, 8 or 9 ranked hazard impact.
Thank you. To the Ministry of Agriculture. Now, I understand from the flooding that took place last year, October, there was a lot of animal carcasses occurring as a result of the flooding and so on. And I understand that there are measures being put in place to respond to the amount of carcasses in future. However, what preventative measures are being put in place to bring animals to safety, and what are the rescue efforts in place, rescue effort plans in place?
To address that, member, after last year, the ministry recognized that there was need to do a lot of things differently. So what we are embarking on right now, as I mentioned, with 2 of our international agencies, we are working on a disaster management plan, a disaster risk management plan, specifically for the peculiarities of the agricultural sector. And that encompasses a lot of protocols that we will now have to put in place. And we have been liaising with our other stakeholders in terms of the protocols that need to be put in place. Because one of the issues that was discussed while we go through the planning process to develop this document is that there is also need to educate our stakeholders, our farming community, in terms of how we sometimes construct our different, holding pens and the different places where we have these animals. Chickens, for instance, most likely flat. So there are lots of discussions going on right now. This plan will not be, different aspects of it will be ready to respond to a challenge that occurs, but some of them are more long-term. So we are discussing these protocols, and of course, we have to meet with our stakeholders because those things would not be ready for this fiscal. But of course, we have the mechanisms being put in place in terms of the action plans that will come out of this strategy to address incidents like that.
Thank you.
Member Mark?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to ask the Permanent Secretary, Suzette Leachy, when you made your opening statement, I took a little note of what you said. And you did advise this committee and the country that funds have been made available to several ministries, obviously in preparation for disaster preparedness, I would imagine, because that is the subject matter that we are dealing with. But I have also received information from the Ministry of Rural and Local Government that this is a surprising figure. Out of a request of 2.35 million for 14 corporations as it relates to disaster preparedness, they had only received up to the time that he spoke a short while ago, $131,000. When I divide that by 14 regional corporations, I got $9,357, $9,357, roughly. Well, let's say just 9.4 thousand to round off. Can you share with this committee when you told us that funds were released to several ministries? Can you share with this committee the quantum that were involved, which ministries we distributed the funds to in preparation for the impending rainy season and to allow them to prepare for any eventuality that may occur? Can you share with us the quantum?
First of all, the reference I made in my opening statement was to the responsiveness to the specific disasters that occurred last year.
Okay.
With respect to the actual funds released, I would have to come back. We don't have that information with us here today, but we certainly can provide it at a later date.
Okay. Madam Chair, I just would like to ask the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, what measures or steps have been taken to address major infrastructural projects by the ministry to minimize discomfort to citizens during the coming rainy season, particularly in the area of installment of bridges, construction of box drains, the clearing and cleaning of illegal dumping grounds, including dilapidated buildings, and the removal of derelict vehicles. I saw that as part of the release issued by the Ministry of Local Government sometime recently. Can you tell us or provide us with any information as it relates to that particular assignment that you would have been able to execute? And where are we?
Madam Chair, the question asked is one that I'll respond with what I am aware of. As far as the specifics are concerned, we will be happy to present such a report in writing. As we speak, I know that the ministry has embarked upon an exercise which deals with the clearing of communal dumps and in areas where there's indiscriminate dumping taking place throughout the country. That has been an ongoing project. As far as the clearing of minor water courses, which falls under the purview of municipal corporations, this is something that I know corporations have been addressing during the dry season. They would be conscious of the consequences of not doing that. As far as the infrastructural projects are concerned, what I can tell you is that there is a marked sense of accomplishment from corporations that have been able to access their funding under the PSIP to engage in drainage and irrigation projects, roads and bridges projects. But as I said before, we will be happy to present the details of such at some later time.
Captain Went, may I ask your good self whether your organization has a permanent place at the table for T and Tech, for TSTT, for PTSC in planning and preparing for national disasters in Trinidad and Tobago? Or are these agencies siloed? Are they operating separately from the ODPM? Or are they part of the steering committee of the ODPM? Can you share with us? I'm not too sure.
Those agencies identified what we refer to as our emergency support function, and yes, they do have a seat and active engagement. They are actively engaged in any incident that they respond to. So they are called emergency support function, and once there is an incident and there is need for that level of coordination of the activities, they are engaged, and along with all the other emergency support function representative will make a contribution in the development of any action plan or incident action plan to address the hazard impact at which the country is dealing with at this point in time. So they do not operate in silo. We have been working with them in some of the establishment of the emergency plans, and those agencies, I will be proud to say, are well poised to assist the nation in the response to any hazard impact.
Yeah. What I'm trying to get from you, Captain Vince, is that I'm not looking at them operating on an ad hoc basis or on a needs basis. I'm looking at them from the perspective of being part of an integrated framework as part of critical components in that overall disaster preparedness. Are these utilities and critical agencies a part of the ODPM integrated framework on a permanent basis?
Yes, they are, member.
That is what I wanted to get clarified. And can you, I want to ask a very frank and straightforward question. And that is to you, Captain Wynne. Do you feel comfortable? Can you give this committee the assurance, and through this committee to the public, that Trinidad and Tobago is in a better place today as we prepare for the oncoming rainy season, having regard to us learning rich lessons from our recent experiences do you feel reasonably comfortable that Trinidad and Tobago is in a much better place to address and overcome in a very quick time a situation similar to what we would have experienced last year? No, it might be a difficult question, but we are dealing with preparation, and we would like to know, if you are not fully happy, can you tell this committee how can we assist the ODPM to help you better prepare the country for any emergency as we go into the rainy season? So I'm asking you we are trying to help you as much as possible so we can help TNT.
Member, thanks for the question. I'll start with the latter. How can the committee help? The committee can help by being one of our supporting advocacy for the recognition for disaster risk governance and risk management, which will really see a system of institution, mechanisms, policies, legal frameworks, and other mechanisms to ensure all of government, all of community approach in understanding risk in our development. So that is one way we could help. That would then support the issues of financing, understanding risk, even the issues of transferring risk by residents, flood policies. So those are the things that would help not only the ODPM, but help every member of society and organization in being able to respond to any hazard impact on Trinidad and Tobago, and to any hazard impact that they might encounter any part of the world, because we move around quite frequently. So our preparedness in Trinidad and Tobago, not just for Trinidad and Tobago, because you can be in a foreign country and and if you're not prepared here, you definitely would not be prepared there. So that requires that holistic approach. So that's where that help is urgently required. Am I satisfied that we are in a better place? Yes, we're in a better place. We are not where I would like us to be. And that will take time. As we have incidents, we are learning. We are learning from the mistakes. As I said, we have identified certain things, and the population is now understanding some of the risks we are exposed to. The severity of any hazard impact will test how ready we are. Japan was one of the most readiest countries for earthquake, and they were still not prepared for the severity to which they experience. And that's my reality. So communities and members of communities will say we are not ready. I'm convinced that we are ready. Our agencies are ready. The severity will test our readiness, and that's in the hands of God. So yes, I'm satisfied we are in a better place than we were last year. With time, we'll be in a more superior place with the aid and assistance of all hands on deck. It requires everybody. This is not, as Mr. David in one of his opening statements says, the first responders of this country are the members of community. And therefore, as we advance into and I move away from the hurricane season, as we look at all hazards, all persons must be ready and understand what they are required to do, how they can help, and how they can help the state to assist its population in responding to these incidents.
Clarification and edification of our colleagues here. Would you care to just elaborate and even point us to one or two examples as it relates to models that you consider to be very useful for this committee's consideration as it relates to the legal framework that you refer to that is urgently required, that you consider we can play a very big role in helping the ODPM and by extension the other agencies that you have to work with? Can you just give us some limited elaboration there, as well as some models that you would like us to look at?
I will start from home. The ODPM has, have drafted a legal framework, but DEMA through CARICOM has established a framework to which its participating states can follow. I will have to do further research because frameworks are based on what I call the cultural and historical norm of any geographic space. So we'll have to take a combination of best practices to so do, starting from which we have done and is presently being revised again. The United States Federal Emergency Management Agency has one policy called a National Incident Management System, which allows a holistic approach and a synchronized approach to responding to incidents. We have some of those things already in place. We just are now in the process of formalizing that. So a written response to your question can be presented as far as a legal framework to which we can adopt. That legal framework will require a bit of desk research and analysis into conventions that we have signed on to which have not been ratified, which has an impact on how we deal with these issues. At present, we have signed on to the Paris Accord, which has been presented, the Sustainable Development Goal, but hinged to that is the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which is also referenced in those two documents, which has not yet been accepted. That is another way to which the committee can assist, because by having Sendai properly adopted and accepted into our landscape, it allows for every agency and entity to understand its risk, plan for its risk, do issues of building back better. So development will take a holistic disaster risk management approach as we advance into what I call that horizontal scan into the next 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, I finally ask you if it's possible that you can submit to this committee your thinking as outlined in writing as to those specifics that we ought to consider as a nation. And if you can provide us with also the legal framework that you indicated that you have begun, and maybe you can tell us how long it will take you to complete and what role we can play in helping you to reach where you'd like to reach finally, so that we can be properly guided as we seek to formulate our recommendations going forward. I'd like to make that request on behalf of the committee.
Will comply.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so I just want to tie up with certain recommendations and responses just to see where we are at. And again, I'm back to the Ministry of National Security. In terms of the virtual vision platform, which we said we started, we got a certain commitment for assistance. We were also supposed to be liaising with TEMA. And according to your response, you were expected, ODPM is expected to engage TEMA by the end of the first quarter of calendar 2019. We're almost to the end of the second quarter. Could you give us some status on that?
That is an ongoing initiative, Madam Chair. So we have been engaging TEMA as early as this week. We have been having discussions with the representative of TEMA, and we are pursuing what I will call that continued harmonized working relationship to support each other in these incidents, both from what I call the operational and the technological phase. The fortune for ODPM at this point as it relates to virtual vision, the designers of that particular program, being nationals who did it for TEMA, are also the same persons who are assisting us with this particular initiative. So the knowledge transfer is what we're going to be benefiting from. And that line of engagement will allow us to advance that particular initiative a bit faster.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of, you said that there's an ongoing collaboration, specifically now with respect to the CERT program. They have had a very successful model, and I've heard Mr. David's enthusiasm and his success stories. But in terms of, there is a promise that you all would engage with THE. I want to know if that's been happening and what is the status of that.
Preliminary discussion has commenced where that is concerned, but the national CERT, when I say national, the Trinidad leg of the CERT initiative is at this present time being led by the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government Initiative.
Right.
Where Tobago is concerned, they have on global record having the first professional CERT volunteer program, and it is a model. So therefore, we are engaging in that. That particular initiative, I said, is being chaired and championed by local government, and we will continue to support. We support local government in some of the initiatives where necessary, once we can do it, by providing lectures, but it's ongoing.
Right. So that in terms of Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, we've heard your own story. And in terms of, has there been any collaboration with TIMA and your own design of your CERT, and whether your successes have been as a result of that, or whether just based on your own program development, you've been seeing your own successes? Because it may mean that this insistence may not be so necessary again.
Madam Chair, I have been to Tobago many times, just go to TIMA alone, just to talk about what they do. And yes, we have the same modules for CERT that TIMA uses, is the same modules we use. However, TIMA takes it to the next level in that they train their people for almost 6 months, and they go through firefighting as if they are firefighters. They go through search and rescue, land and sea, as if they were firefighters. They are professional CERTs. We are creating in our communities volunteer CERTs, people who will help in every corner and not wait for a professional CERT to come by. Because even the professional CERTs will not be able to come and help because they may be engaged elsewhere. Right. But on the streets in our communities, we have people there who are trained to do CPR,
okay,
trained to do...
All right, I just don't want to cut you, but in interest of time, because I mean, you all have been here a long time, and I do commend your enthusiasm. So that, am I hearing then that we don't see the need for the professional CERTs?
I particularly, in my point of view, my respectful view, is that train 130,000 Trinidadians who can help each other on the street corners, wherever it is, and then we may not need that type of model.
Smart answer. But let me ask it another way. Are the two systems of functionaries mutually exclusive?
No.
Okay, great. Thank you. And the last question I want to ask is, and I guess maybe it's the PS, Ministry of National Security. In terms of, we'd ask about lessons learned, and I heard Captain Min said not so much lessons learned, but observations. But in your response, you had indicated that a comprehensive mechanism for documenting lessons learned is currently being finalized. What is the status of that?
That actually is with the ODPM. I just want to add, though, that I think one of the biggest things for us in terms of what transpired last time is the need for communication and networking. I think there's where we felt the greatest need to strengthen our networking and communication between agencies. And it's something that we've been working on diligently in the last several months to tighten up that collaboration between the ODPM, the stakeholders such as the fire services and other agencies of the Ministry of National Security, but critically other agencies such as the Ministry of Rural and Local Government.
Okay, therefore, if I take it that in the lessons learned, and that was one, you had identified 10, the need for 10 different things, right, including social media management service, the hiring of staff in critical positions, I'd see that, okay, you've started that, the enforcement of the National Crisis Communications Response Framework, I guess that is what you're talking about in terms of the communication, so that if I can take these 10 items and ask you, Mr. Pierce, if you could submit to us in writing a status report on each of these 10 items that you had identified the need for or the improvement on. Okay?
Certainly, will do, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
And just follow up on you, Mr. Pierce, Mr. Lewis, you indicated that what is with the Prime Minister? Is it the final report that the chairman asked? You did say something is with the Prime Minister.
No, I think it's with the ODPM.
Oh,
I think ODPM.
Oh, it would be, okay.
Yeah, so that we expect we would get all of that, and the Secretariat in their communication would give the timelines. Okay, so that it is, I think at this stage I would really like to bring the conversation to an end. I really want to thank everybody here present, the Ministry of National Security, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, and the Ministry of Finance. And all the other technocrats, I want to really thank you all for attending and helping us understand, and by extension the national community, understand where we are at, in the hope that we do the rainy season 2019 better than the rainy season 2018. While we really more or less focus on rain and the hazard impact, I just learned that, Mr. Wint. We know that there are other areas, the fires. We didn't touch on the fires in Point Fortin, even though I heard Mr. Paul indicate that there was a fire last night. So we're going to send some other questions to be addressed in writing. I now want to suspend the meeting at this stage. I want to also thank the members of the media who have stayed with us. I also want to thank the members of the listening public who stayed with us. I want to wish you all a safe journey home, and in the hope that for the betterment of all of us, all of Trinidad and Tobago, that we handle the challenges, the hazard impacts, the events, the disaster, the incidents, the occurrences. Captain Wint, I hope that manual will really help me with the lexicon. I hope we do it better. Okay, so I thank you. Pleasant evening, safe journey home. This meeting is now suspended.